Nobody wants to buy garbage. You would never willingly empty your wallet for a box of dust, dead skin cells, and pet hair. Yet millions of highly rational human beings eagerly wait in line to pay $700 for a plastic machine explicitly designed to aggressively collect it. A vacuum cleaner is historically a lowly, deeply depressing appliance. It is a symbol of endless, repetitive domestic labor. It is loudly hidden in a dark hallway closet. But one rogue engineer completely shattered this reality. He took a boring, noisy utility and violently transformed it into a globally coveted luxury flex. People do not just use this machine. They proudly mount it on their living room walls like a priceless piece of modern art. How did a tool used to suck dirt out of a carpet become the ultimate status symbol of the modern upper middle class? There is a highly specific, deeply psychological strategy at play here. It completely manipulates human perception. We are going to strictly reveal the exact mechanics of this hidden behavioral trigger and how it entirely rewrites the rules of product marketing a little later in this breakdown. Welcome to the invisible, highly lucrative world of premium commoditization. For nearly an entire century, the global vacuum cleaner industry was a completely stagnant, highly depressing market. It was a classic distress purchase. You never woke up excited to buy a vacuum. You only aggressively drove to the store when your old machine violently caught fire or entirely stopped working. The products were incredibly boring. The technology was completely frozen in the 1950s. Enter James Dyson. He was a fiercely stubborn British design engineer with absolutely zero experience in the highly insular home appliance market. He confidently stepped into an impenetrable, monopolized global arena. He built a machine that looked like an aggressive, brightly colored alien spaceship. He priced it at an absolute, seemingly insulting 500% premium over the market average. And he completely obliterated the legacy giants. So how exactly did James Dyson reimagine a profoundly boring, dirty household chore into a highly coveted, multi-billion-dollar luxury empire? That is the exact question we are answering today. To deeply and thoroughly understand the absolute genius of this strategic framework, we have to aggressively examine the massive corporate scam of the 20th century appliance market. Look closely at the 1970s. The vacuum cleaner industry was entirely dominated by massive legacy players like Hoover and Electrolux. They controlled the entire globe. But they were absolutely not in the business of selling vacuum cleaners. They were in the highly lucrative business of selling paper bags. It was the ultimate execution of the razor and blades business model. The legacy companies sold the heavy plastic vacuum at a relatively low, accessible price. But you were violently forced to buy their proprietary paper bags for the entire life cycle of the machine. This created a massive, highly profitable recurring revenue stream. But it hid a terrifying, fundamental physical flaw. The standard vacuum bag is absolutely terrible at its single job. As soon as you turn a brand new machine on, the highly porous paper bag immediately begins to fail. The microscopic pores completely clog with fine dust within the first 5 minutes of operation. The physical airflow is completely choked. The suction power violently drops. The machine instantly becomes useless. It leaves aggressive amounts of hidden dirt deep inside your carpets. But the massive legacy companies absolutely did not care. They were making absolute billions selling the replacement bags. They had absolutely zero financial incentive to ever invent a fundamentally better machine. Why would they heavily invest in radical innovation when the deeply flawed product was generating endless, compounding profits? It was a perfectly engineered corporate hostage situation. The consumer was completely trapped in an endless, deeply frustrating cycle of terrible performance and continuous replacement costs. Then the J-curve aggressively dipped. In 1978, James Dyson bought a brand new, highly expensive Hoover vacuum cleaner. He brought it home. He turned it on. It immediately failed to pick up the dirt. He was completely furious. He did not simply return it to the store. He aggressively took a knife and ripped open the proprietary paper bag. He intimately studied the physics of the failure. He discovered the clogged pores. He realized the entire global industry was built on a massive, highly inefficient lie. He boldly decided to completely eliminate the bag. Dyson retreated to a small, freezing carriage house behind his home. He became a lone, heavily obsessed man in a shed. He remembered a massive, highly powerful industrial cyclone separator he had once seen at a local timber mill. It used extreme centrifugal force to violently spin heavy sawdust out of the air without ever using a physical filter. He aggressively wondered if he could miniaturize that massive industrial physics experiment and fit it inside a standard household appliance. He built his very first crude prototype using raw cardboard and sticky duct tape. He attached it to the motor of his broken Hoover. It aggressively worked. The centrifugal force successfully separated the dust from the air. The suction never, ever dropped. But having a brilliant technical breakthrough is absolutely not enough. Taking it to the global market was a highly terrifying, completely agonizing nightmare. Dyson spent 5 grueling years in that cold shed. He meticulously built exactly 5,127 distinct physical prototypes. Every single day was a massive, highly frustrating failure. He fell into massive, crushing financial debt. His wife had to single-handedly support the family by teaching art classes. They almost violently lost their family home to the aggressive banks. He finally perfected the dual cyclone technology. It was absolutely flawless. He confidently took his brilliant prototype directly to the massive legacy vacuum manufacturers. He fully expected them to immediately buy the patent and change the world. They literally laughed him straight out of the boardroom. They absolutely refused to look at his machine. They aggressively told him that the global replacement bag market was worth over $500 million annually. They would absolutely never willingly destroy their own highly profitable recurring revenue stream. They aggressively protected the status quo. He was completely, terrifyingly shut out. Dyson was violently forced to go completely rogue. He aggressively pivoted his entire strategy. He traveled to Japan. The Japanese consumer market historically possesses a massive, deeply ingrained cultural reverence for high-end, strange, highly advanced technology. In 1986, he launched the G-Force vacuum strictly in Japan. It was completely bizarre. It was bright pink. It was aggressively loud. And it cost the absolute equivalent of $2,000. It was an immediate, massive phenomenon. It instantly became a high-end status symbol among the wealthy Japanese elite. It was absolutely not a household utility. It was an expensive, highly visible statement of technological sophistication. Dyson heavily used the aggressive Japanese profits to finally launch his own independent manufacturing company in the United Kingdom. In 1993, he forcefully released the DC01. It completely shattered every single established rule of appliance design. Traditional vacuums were always painted in highly muted, deeply apologetic colors. Beige, soft green, dull brown. They were actively designed to blend in. They were designed to silently disappear into the hallway closet. The Dyson DC01 was bright, aggressive yellow, and heavy industrial silver. It looked exactly like a piece of heavy construction equipment. It proudly exposed its complex internal engineering. It aggressively screamed for attention. But the most radical, highly controversial design choice of all was the dirt bin. It was entirely constructed of clear, highly transparent polycarbonate plastic. The seasoned industry experts aggressively mocked him. Focus groups violently rejected the concept. Market researchers loudly insisted that nobody wants to actively look at their own disgusting filth. They assumed the consumer wanted the dirt quietly hidden away in in a highly opaque paper bag. They were completely, mathematically wrong. The transparent bin was an absolute psychological masterpiece. It is the core, highly guarded secret of the entire Dyson empire. When you blindly push a traditional bag machine across your living room floor, you have absolutely zero idea if it is actually working. The entire process is a massive, highly frustrating act of blind faith. You are doing the physical labor, but you receive absolutely zero psychological payoff. But with a Dyson, you physically see the violent, aggressively spinning cyclone vortex. You actively watch the dirt, the dust, and the pet hair aggressively accumulate in the clear plastic chamber. It successfully provides instant, undeniable, deeply satisfying visual feedback. You absolutely did not just clean the carpet. You successfully extracted a hidden enemy. You physically conquered the filth. It completely turned a highly boring, incredibly tedious household chore into a deeply rewarding, visually stimulating psychological victory. The machine aggressively proved its own massive value every single time you turned it on. You could literally see the high-end physics actively working for you. And that is the massive, profound secret. Dyson absolutely did not just sell superior centrifugal suction. He heavily sold the deeply satisfying, highly emotional proof of competence. He made the invisible completely, violently visible. He successfully tapped into a highly complex economic phenomenon known strictly as the Veblen Good. In traditional economic theory, when the price of a normal product increases, the consumer demand mathematically decreases. But a Veblen Good completely violates this fundamental law. With a Veblen Good, the extraordinarily high price is the actual feature. The aggressive price tag actively creates the desirability. It signals extreme exclusivity. It signals uncompromised engineering. By pricing his vacuum 5 times higher than the market average, Dyson completely removed his product from the highly saturated, incredibly boring utility category. He aggressively placed it directly into the highly emotional luxury category. You do not buy a Rolex to simply tell the time. You absolutely do not buy a Ferrari just to commute to work. And you do not buy a Dyson simply to remove dust. You buy it to aggressively signal to yourself and to your highly observant houseguests that you deeply value elite, uncompromised performance. The transparent bin and the aggressive industrial design allowed the consumer to proudly display their massive investment. But actually executing this highly aggressive transparency strategy in the complex, highly political reality of modern business is incredibly rare. The absolute worst, most terrifying offenders of hiding massive, deeply flawed inefficiencies are massive enterprise corporations. Think deeply about the heavily complex, incredibly frustrating internal software infrastructure of the modern corporate workplace. Legacy human resources platforms are exactly like those old, highly inefficient, completely opaque vacuum bags. They are aggressively designed to hide the actual reality of the organization. They trap highly talented, incredibly valuable employees in a dark, heavily frustrating void of complex, invisible corporate bureaucracy. Business leaders blindly push these clunky legacy systems across their massive global organizations, completely assuming that the actual work is being successfully done. But they have absolutely zero actual visibility. They are completely, terrifyingly blind to the massive internal friction violently destroying their own workforce. They cannot see the highly toxic bottlenecks. They cannot see the highly expensive talent silently leaving the organization because the internal systems are an agonizing nightmare. This is exactly why ambitious, highly successful modern global organizations absolutely must entirely reject opaque legacy systems. You urgently need a digital infrastructure that ruthlessly enforces absolute, crystal-clear transparency across your entire human capital strategy. That is exactly where Pulsemina HCM completely disrupts the entire enterprise paradigm. Pulsemina HCM is exactly like the transparent bin for your entire global workforce. It completely and aggressively strips away the dark, frustrating, highly opaque corporate bureaucracy. Instead of relentlessly hiding your most critical workforce data inside deeply confusing legacy modules, Pulse Mina HCM flawlessly exposes the truth. It seamlessly provides absolute, crystal-clear transparency into employee performance, highly complex onboarding processes, and critical global talent alignment. It mathematically eliminates the hidden internal friction by making the actual daily workflow incredibly visible and deeply intuitive. It actively proves its own massive value to the employee and the executive every single time they seamlessly log in. It is the highly guarded, elite operational secret weapon for modern leaders who fiercely demand high-performance clarity instead of legacy corporate darkness. It perfectly allows ambitious companies to aggressively map their long-term growth by finally making the massive, highly complex human element of their business completely visible and structurally sound. Ultimately, the legendary, highly disruptive history of James Dyson definitively proves a highly fundamental, completely inescapable law of modern global strategy. The ultimate corporate victor is absolutely never the company that seamlessly blends in. The ultimate corporate victor is always the company that aggressively forces the consumer to see the absolute truth of their own environment. When you finally stop violently hiding your own flaws in opaque bags, and you rigorously start engineering for absolute, undeniable transparency, you completely destroy the legacy incumbents. You completely elevate the core value of your offering. You successfully architect a highly loyal, entirely unshakable corporate empire that commands absolute premium authority. If you learned something incredibly new today, hit the like button and immediately subscribe for more elite strategy breakdowns. And let us precisely know in the comments below what massive company's hidden strategy should we completely unlock next.